Greetings, fellow humans. Welcome to the Brandon Lunch Bunch. We're a group of business owners and professionals in Central Florida, and we're getting together to share tips and ideas on doing business in these stay-at-home COVID times. Online meeting services provided by a Better Choice Network Solutions. Brandon Lunch Bunch is a production of Pacesetter Media.
Greetings, everybody, and my name is Dave Loebig with Pacesetter Media, and I'm your host today. Today, I'm going to be talking about how to do one of these lower thirds, using the OBS Studio software. And we've got a panel with us today. Darren, can you please introduce yourself?
Well, of course. Good morning, everyone, and thanks for having me on the Brandon Lunch Bunch. Today, I want to talk about onboarding your staff. We're all bringing back a lot of people and rebuilding our team, so I want to make sure that onboarding process is going right and you're selecting the right people. Thanks for having me.
Thank you. Danielle.
Good morning, everyone. Happy Thursday. Wow, I do know what day it is. That is a new development. Welcome to Brandon Lunch Bunch again. I am going to talk a little bit about deadlines today, just real quick.
Very good. Ryan?
Yeah,
welcome,
hi, everybody.
By the way, to your first Brandon Lunch Bunch.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me. I'm Ryan Cabrera with Champion Payments. We are a merchant services firm local here to Brandon. And today I'm going to be talking about the ugly side of merchant services during the shutdown.
Thank you. And Yovi.
Good morning, everybody. Happy Thursday too. This is Yovi Fermin. I'm a realtor with Charles Rutenberg Realty. And I'll be sharing today a few instances when a buyer should walk away from a transaction.
Thank you so much. Darren, you're up first. Please take it away.
Wonderful. Just give me a quick second to share my screen here. Okay. So staff onboarding, right? We're bringing back this team. We're trying to rebuild our staff in a way that allows us to move forward and grow our business back. We understand the big challenges that we've had out there, and the unemployment rate obviously has just gone absolutely crazy. So here's what I want you to think about as you slowly rebuild your team. Whether that team is 55 or 12, or maybe it's just 3 or 4 of you, your team still consists of your outboarding services, right? The team that you build around, whether it's your marketing help or your accounting or your financial controls. So the team can be your 2 or 3 key employees. It can be your 7 or 8 managers, or it can be your 92 staff. Start thinking about the staff that you had prior to this, right? If we're slowly rebuilding, look at the superstars that you had 2 or 3 months. You should be working with those people now. You should be understanding that they're part of that vision, that group that can rebuild you. So you've got to involve your key people. And if they're going to be involved, they have to understand where the business is going. There's been so many changes, and they want to feel like they're part of the success to rebuild. Then once you have your core team, it goes to understanding what your hiring needs are. Whether you're bringing on 3 people or a couple dozen, you want some really good hiring procedures. So what I find is that where we were with the staff just a few months ago was it was very difficult to hire some great people. In the restaurant industry, we heard it challenged all the time. We're going from a 3.4% unemployment currently, and I haven't heard what it is yet today, but the 14.7. There's a complete flip in the labor market. So take the hiring piece very serious. Make sure that you're taking the time. 2. I want 2 interviews on 2 days by 2 different people. A lot of companies are going to video interviews. We're trying to lessen the contact that we have with people. So sit down, interview the people, get to know them, and bring on the right ones. So I like to be the one that would hire one person from 25 interviews instead of the first person that walks in the door. Take the hiring very intense right now. You got to build that team back. Orientation is now how you bring these people in, right? It starts with your employee manual, your policies, your procedures. You have to have that right first. Orientation is a great time to get to know this person. The highest ranking manager, whether you're the owner or the GM or the director of operations should be sitting down as the first step for onboarding this new employee. Get them a cup of coffee, you go through the paperwork, but you're there to start to build a relationship, and you're there to start to set your expectations, right? Spend some time with this person, review the policies and procedures, and you got to be strong on all these new procedures. So as you slowly onboard them, it's about getting the right people in the right place at the right time. The training system then becomes a big part of it, and training for me is a very intense program that we're going to cover next time. So that's what I had for you today. Hope you can bring on some new staff in a nice, simple, professional manner.
Thank you. And Danielle, you're up, please.
Hello, hello. So today I just wanted to drop a quick reminder for you that your taxes are due in 48 days and 12 hours. So if you have not gotten in touch with your tax preparer because you thought, oh gosh, well, I have until July. Guess what? July is coming. It's coming very quickly. And I also wanted to remind you that though there was an extension of your tax returns, that also means that there was an extension of the payment due. So your payment on whatever balance that is due with your tax return is due that same day as well. So July 15th is filing and payment day. If you file for an extension on the extension, which is a little bit confusing, your tax return will not be due until October 15th, but your payment is still due July 15th. So make sure that you make that payment on July 15th, no matter what, or you're going to end up with penalties that are pretty nasty. So make sure you get that payment in, make sure you get that tax return in. And if you happen to be in another state outside of Florida that has an income tax, you're going to want to make sure that your state has extended their deadline to match the IRS deadline. There are several states that have chosen not to. Mississippi, for example, is one of those states, and their return was due on May 15th. So make sure that you are looking at what your state has done in terms of these extensions, and also make sure that your payment and your return is filed on July 15th with the IRS. That's all I've got.
Thank you so much. And I'm up next, and what I'm going to talk about are these lower thirds on doing it in OBS software. And I'm going to share my screen also. In fact, I'm going to turn off my video, because once I get over to OBS software, you'll be seeing me up here. And this is OBS Studio. It's the free software you can use online to do fancy stuff like these lower thirds. And I want to show you how to do one of these lower thirds. Now, you're going to start with a source list much smaller than this. This is my scene that I use. Over here in the bottom left are the scenes. And you might see it like this initially. It's a list. I switched mine to grid mode. Either way, here are your scenes. This scene is populated with a lot of layers. I'm going to switch to this scene, which has fewer layers. This is more like what you're going to have once you get your OBS set up, maybe just a camera, a microphone. You probably won't have Lester. And what I also want to do, though, in this case, is, in fact, turn Lester on. This is Lester Holt from NBC News. Last week when I talked about the surveying of head heights, this is one of the ones I use. Notice his head is about 50% the height of the screen and maybe 10 or 12% from the top. He, incidentally, is one of the few anchors that does not have a lower third at the bottom of them. So I'm going to use that as the background so it doesn't, so my movement doesn't distract. And here's how to do a lower third in OBS. So whatever scene you're working on, you have a list of sources here. In Photoshop, they would be called layers, and that's what I might end up calling them because that's what I'm used to calling them. Here you have to add a new layer or add a new source. Let's start with that. And we're going to do a color source. I'm going to call this bar, because it's going to be a bar across the bottom. Click OK, and that's just naming the source you're going to, the name of the source in the source list. Now I need to pick a color. I'm going to pick some blue. Anyway, if you know hue, saturation, and brightness or RGB values, you can do this or just pick a color here. So I'm just going to pick a color from this color picker. Click OK. Now it's blue. Click OK. Now notice it is huge, much bigger than I need it to be. You can size it down by clicking on the handles. Now this is different than Photoshop. If you don't hold Shift, it sizes it proportionally. If you want to size it disproportionately, you have to hold the Shift key and grab one of the handles. And I'm, again, holding the Shift key and dragging the handle. Now I've let go of the Shift key. I'm just going to drag it up to about where I think I want it. Now I want to put text on top of that. Again, in the sources list, click plus to add a source. Now we're going to do text. And I'm going to call this name. Again, you can name it whatever you want. It's just the name that's going to show up in the source list. Click OK. Now, text in OBS is a little clunky. This is just how it works. This is what you're going to have to put up with. I'm going to type my name, pipe, Pacesetter Media. Now, you can see behind the text editing panel, it's gigantic. So you can select the font as well as the size, and you're just going to have to experiment some with what works. I know that 110 does not work, but I'll just show you anyway, just the process you have to go through to resize it. You do a test, try a size, it doesn't work, come back in. I'm going to go with 55. Click OK. Now you have text about the size you want. You'll play with it, change the font, change the color if you want, and then just move that down to the bottom. And here's a cool trick. Right click, transform, center horizontally. Now it's centered on the screen. One other thing I would do with these, just because right now I can turn my name off and then turn the bar off, only one at a time. Click on name, shift, click on bar. Now both of them are selected, both sources in the source panel. Right click and choose group selected items. And here you can name this group. And I called it lower third. And now they're in a group. And I can close that group. And now with one click, I turn the lower third on and off. By the way, I've kept my name and company towards the middle. I found in some systems, you get the sides of the video get cropped off. If that happens, I still want my name and company to show up. And one other extra you can do, you can also do a fancier background. And OBS is just a solid color. I created a bar that looks a little fancier. It's an image. I'm going to call this source lower bar. I'm just going to add an image to the sources. And click OK. In OBS, you now have to tell OBS where to find that image. I click Browse. You'll have to find this image on your computer, wherever you store it. Click OK. Now I've got a fancier bar I can put behind my name. Again, I have to resize it, move it into the proper place. Now notice lower bar, which is the image, is above the lower thirds group. I'm going to drag this into the group. In fact, below name. And now I can turn off the simple color. Now I have a slightly fancier lower third. And that's the quick of it. That's how to do a lower third in OBS software. Check Pacesetter Media later today. I will have uploaded there some fancy bars you could use of different colors. That same bar you just saw, I will upload it with different colors. You're welcome to download those bars and use them in OBS software. That's how to do a lower third in OBS software. Next up, Ryan, if you could please.
Yeah, first off, I just want to say thank you to Darren for inviting me. I do appreciate. Darren has been a great source of help for me over the years. And if you're the owner of a restaurant, I cannot say enough about Darren's service, whether it be the secret shopping or the coaching. I've recommended him to several clients over the years, and he's always done kind of a bang up job for them. So what I want to talk about today very quickly is the ugly side of merchant services during the shutdown. And so I'm going to tell you a story of something that just happened to me yesterday. One of the cool things about us here at Champion Payments is that we're able to a lot of times help clean up the messes that small business owners are left with, from dealing with either a sales rep that didn't know what they were doing, or a company that kind of systemically has some misleading pricing or products or something like that. And so in this case, it was the owner of a diner. I received a referral from a current customer of ours to go and help this guy out. And so I got on the phone with him, and I could just hear in his voice the just the stress that he was going through. During the COVID-19 shutdown, many restaurants were able to stay open for, takeout and delivery, but many other restaurants weren't really set up for that yet. And so if they weren't already set up, it was a very hard transition for them. And so this particular restaurant had shut down on March 20th, and they hadn't been open since. And their merchant services company that they were using for credit card processing was charging them $50 every day that they did not process any payments as like a minimum daily fee. Now, I've been doing credit card processing for about 10 years now, and I've heard of minimum fees being somewhere around $50, but usually like $50 a month. And $50 a day seemed a bit extreme to me, as I could probably guess that it sounds a bit extreme to you. But in this instance, when somebody's charging you $50 a day on an account that really doesn't have anything coming in or going out of it at the moment, and you're not really checking it every day and not aware of it, that can cause some problems. And in this case, for this guy, it did. They charged him $50 a day, drained his account all the way down to zero, and then below zero, because his bank started paying out this $50 a month, even though he had overdrafted the account. And then the bank was charging him a $38 fee for every transaction that came through after the overdraft. So needless to say, this poor guy, finally, when he caught this, had a lot of work to do with the bank to get this stopped. Well, when he worked at the bank put a hold on his account. And because there was a hold on his account, and now the merchant services company wasn't able to collect money, they froze his processing account and put it in collections. Now, all that sounds pretty awful, if you ask me. Freezing the account and for collections is a pretty normal process. But what happens next is kind of where the frustrating piece comes in. He works with his bank, gets his overdraft fees, returned. He works with the processing company and tries to get some money back. He's still working on that today. And he's open for a whole week and receives no deposits in his account for the processing that he did for that week. And normally his, deposits, I think, were out, maybe 2 days. He's getting 48-hour funding. And so in this particular case, this poor guy, when I talk to him, he's putting all of this money in by, swiping cards all day long, and giving out food all day long, and putting out the money to give out the food. But yet, whenever the processing funds are supposed to come into account, he's not seeing it come in. So obviously he's on the phone with the processing company trying to figure out where his money is. And at this point, he has about $8,000 held up with the processing company. And he's got a promise, that they're going to deposit the next day. And this goes on for a couple more days. And all the while, he's still processing payments, right? He's, swiping cards, giving out food. And, needless to say, in this day where, restaurants especially are operating on, less income than they're used to, and also trying to do whatever they can to incentivize customers to come in and, actually, purchase food from them because of the outbreak and everything. This is becomes a pretty dire situation. So when I talk to him, he kind of just breaks down, literally in tears, and expresses to me, hey, look, I'm a good cook. I'm good, at managing the staff. I'm good at making the customers happy, but the business side, I'm not real great at. And he says, I've got a recommendation to you because, another restaurant owner that I know says that you guys are trustworthy and you're able to, take care of this. And so obviously I felt for him. And there was a couple things that I did. The first thing I did from our side is I just wanted to know what type of a credit card equipment was he using, because for him, if I could give him the same thing, back to help him out in this situation so that he didn't have to also learn a new system in order to process payments, that would be helpful. Luck of the draw, it was something that we had in stock. It's not always the case, but many times it is. And I was able to take a box. This is probably around 1 o'clock in the afternoon. I put the machine in the box. I drove down to his place. I sat down with him. I took a look at everything. And after some conversation, he and I both decided that it would probably not be too smart to continue processing payments into a system where there's no deposits coming out of that system. And so long story short, we were able to set him up with a new account and program his new equipment, put in the new equipment so that this morning he was able to begin processing, and then he'll receive those funds the next morning. We also got on the phone with his processing company, and we're able to kind of work, just for me, kind of speaking the lingo, work out what he needed to do in order to get funds deposited for him today. And I did receive a text message from this morning that he did receive the funds. And so this is just an example of the ugly side of payment processing. It doesn't mean it's the end of the world, but what happens sometimes is more important than having the best rate or the best, the lowest price or anything like that. It's more important to have somebody that you can trust and that you can talk to that can influence your account. Many times when you're dealing with a large institution, you may have a great salesperson that makes a lot of promises, but in the end, when they provide the product or service to you, it's done by somebody in some call center, some office somewhere, which isn't necessarily a bad thing, but it separates the person who makes the promise from the promise for the promise fulfillment itself. And so in this case, I think for all small business owners, saving some money on payment processing, upgrading equipment so that you can take contactless payments, making sure that you're not dousing it in, chemicals or anything like that, but that you're just wiping it with a wipe, things like that are very helpful in this time. And so I thought that story might be helpful to some, especially for people that might be struggling with a merchant services firm in a time like this. If you had low volume and they were charging you a bunch of fees, there may be some things that you can do, and even we might even be able to help you do to get some of that money back, and then also get set up on the right foot going forward.
Thank you.
Sure.
Ryan, that is a horrendous story of what restaurants have to go through these days. My word. Yovi, you're up next.
Well, thanks to Brian. Thank you to Brian for having the kind of company that can help those small business owners get afloat when that they have those kind of situations. So today, in the emotion-fueled world of home buying, there are times that make financial sense for a buyer to let a real estate transaction fall through. Not all deals get done. According to the National Association of Realtors, about 6% of the real estate transactions don't close. Often, the reason walks away is due to circumstances beyond their control, such as having the bank withdraw funding due to a job loss or a divorce that interrupt the income to make mortgage payments. Another deal killer is an agreement to buy a new house contingent upon selling another one, which doesn't happen. But most often, buyers walk away because they are being prudent. So there are a few instances where deals don't go through, and I'm going to share 3 of the most common ones. So the first common deal breaker is home inspection issues. If the home inspector uncover bad things such as a compromised foundation, mold and water-related issues, poor workmanship, or other issues that could prevent the home from being insured, That would be a reason to rip up a real estate contract. Also, if the seller would not agree to pay for pricey repairs or needed fixes, that should be a red flag, and the buyer should definitely cancel the contract. The buyer has to decide if the condition of the house is something they're willing to accept. Sometimes repair may exceed what buyers are willing to accept, or even if what they can afford. Another deal breaker includes lower appraisal, and this happens often. If buyers are borrowing money from a bank to buy a house, often these deals are killed by appraisals that come in that fall through because the appraisal comes and in a much lower price than the agreed price. If the seller doesn't agree to sell the home at the lower appraised price, or the parties cannot meet halfway, or the buyer can come out with a larger down payment or more money to make that purchase price, the deal will likely die. Also, if there are instances where the difference in the appraisal is a couple $1,000s, and in those instances, the buyer and the seller come to an agreement and a deal can close. But if the appraisal comes in at a higher difference in price, let's say $10,000 or more, the chances that the deal falls through are even greater. The other issues that we face in real estate transactions is paperwork issues at closing. Buyers should consider walking away if the document preparation for closing highlights potential problems. Some deal breakers include title issues that put into question who the real owner of the property is. That's a big red flag. Another issues are outstanding liens or missing heirs who may own a piece of the property the buyer wants to purchase. Another common issue is if all the owners on the deed are not in the contract. We see this often when couples get separated and one party is trying to sell the property without the other party knowing. So basically, there cannot be a deal if the seller cannot deliver a clear title. Our job as realtors is to evaluate the property with logic and educate and protect our buyers by recommending them when they should walk away from a deal. It's sad when a buyer has to walk away from their dream home, but sometimes no deal is better than to have a bad deal. So that's my segment for today. And if you guys don't have any questions, that's it for me.
Thank you so much.
My pleasure.
Appreciate it. And that wraps it up. Just let me remind you once again, if you're working at home and you're not used to working at home and now you're sitting around a lot, make sure you stand up. I've been working at home for 20 years. It's easy to sit at the computer too much. Make sure you stand up today, do some squats, walk around the block, get up, get some activity, stay healthy. And our next Brandon Lunch Bunch, let me get to it, is next week, June 4th. Thursday, June 4th, 11 a.m., next Brandon Lunch Bunch. See you then. Thank you so much for joining us.